Running into battle with a dragon at their side, the Drakewarden is the perfect subclass for any player who dreams of having a dragon as a pet. Dragons are the constant fantasy creature and an iconic monster across the world. It should be pretty self-explanatory, but this is why you should play a Drakewarden. Let's state the obvious. The main reason to play this subclass is that you get a dragon. I mean, technically it is a draconic spirit, but in-game, it's basically a dragon. The only real difference is that if this dragon is killed, you can spend a spell slot to re-summon it back to your side. However, you still get the benefit of watching the dragon slowly grow with you over the course of your adventure. It literally starts out as a small creature at 3rd level before growing into a large dragon by 15th level. In terms of regular dragons, a 15th level dragon is the size of a young chromatic dragon, which is a CR 10 creature. But not only does this dragon grow in terms of size, but it learns how to fly, breathe fire, and eventually allows you to ride atop it. Yes, you can be a true dragon rider with this subclass. However, the great thing is that at all levels, the Dragon Companion is a monster in combat. It starts off with a base AC of 16 that scales all the way up to AC 20. That means at pretty much all levels, your dragon is going to be difficult to hit in combat. But dragons are hardy creatures and your Dragon Companion is just the same. It starts out with 20 hit points, which is already fantastic at 3rd level, but it scales all the way up to 105 hit points by 20th level. Your dragon is great on the front line, absorbing damage that the rest of the party would have taken otherwise. And even if your companion is reduced to 0 hit points, that's fine. Just burn a spell slot to re-summon your companion as an action after the battle. Easy. But your Draconic Companion isn't just a defensive tool, because commanding your dragon in combat is essentially a better hunter's mark for your ranger. You have to use your bonus action in combat to command your dragon to take an action. Most of the time your dragon is going to be taking the attack action to bite your enemies, and that's just going to start out at a d6 plus 2 damage. This is fine, slightly better than a regular hunter's mark, but once again your dragon is going to scale with you, gaining an extra d6 of damage at level 7 and 15. While this isn't a jaw-dropping amount of damage, it is still useful to do chip damage against a large boss monster or to take out some of the smaller minion type creatures that you'll encounter on a battlefield. However, the dragon can also use its reaction to give you hunter's mark damage. The dragon can give an extra d6 of elemental damage to a creature who was hit within 30 feet of the dragon. So basically you're just replacing your hunter's mark. This is a do-it-all companion in combat, and I absolutely love its design. But this subclass also functions very well outside of combat due to a multitude of quality of life features that it has been given. When you pick up this subclass at 3rd level, you're going to get Draconic Gift, which is going to provide you 2 things. One, the ability to speak, read, and write in Draconic, and the Thaumaturgy cantrip. Being able to speak Draconic is necessary to communicate with your dragon, so it's great that this subclass just gives you that language right off the bat. It doesn't punish you if you didn't know that you were going to pick the Drakewarden subclass right from the start. Then the Thaumaturgy cantrip allows you to play up your draconic nature. For instance, you can alter the appearance of your eyes to resemble draconic eyes, or make your voice boom 3 times as loud as you put on your draconic voice. I know these might seem like small features, but they really improve the play experience for this subclass overall, so I needed to shout them out. And finally, the mechanics of this subclass support the idea that you have a deep bond with your dragon. The Drakewarden subclass does a great job using the leveling process to show your connection grow between you and your companion. For instance, at 7th level, you have the exact same elemental resistance as your Draconic Spirit does. This is a great example of the mechanics of a subclass perfectly entwining themselves with the roleplay concept behind it. This is actually a great segue to talking about the role-playing elements behind the Drakewarden. At least for me, this subclass revolves around the connection between the dragon and the dragon rider. When you're building a Drakewarden, really focus on that connection. Just looking at the stats of your companion, it has an 8 in intelligence, a 14 in wisdom, and an 8 in charisma. This isn't a run-of-the-mill pet, your dragon is intelligent. You and your dungeon master should build your dragon companion like you'd build an NPC because they have that capability. Heck, if other members of your party know Draconic, they will be able to talk to your dragon. So really put some tender love and care to fleshing out this secondary NPC. What does your dragon think of you? What do they think of the other party members? Do they have any dreams or aspirations? These are all questions you can ask to tremendously increase your role-playing experience. Additionally, think about how you first met your draconic spirit, because this is something we have to keep in mind. This really isn't rules as written a true dragon. It is a draconic spirit that you can summon over and over and over again. While yes, it has a physical body, it doesn't really ever die. So what is this spirit? Is the spirit a gift from your ancestors? Did you slay a young dragon and is their spirit now bound to you? Were you part of an order of rangers that raised dragons and through a ritual they bind draconic spirit to you? Try and find an answer to these questions, and at the end of the day, know your draconic companion as well as you know your own character. Now though, we're going to move on to the multi-classing options you have with the Drakewarden, and I think there are two prime candidates. You can either multi-class into the fighter class or the cleric class. Starting with the fighter class, the basic fighter is going to be useful to any and all rangers out there. But really, if you're making this dip, I suggest you go to level 3 and pick up the cavalier subclass. You see, the Cavalier Fighter has subclass features that help you while you are mounted in combat, though Drakewarden provides a consistent mount at level 7 and beyond. With the Cavalier feature Born to Saddle, it's essentially making sure that you can mount your Draconic companion no matter what. Also, because it only costs 5 feet of movement to get off of your Drake, you can catapult yourself forward for these amazing turns. Additionally, the Cavalier's Unwavering Mark feature becomes even better. If an enemy that you've hit before strikes your dragon, you can make a bonus action attack on your turn. This bonus action attack has advantage, and if it hits, it deals extra damage equal to your fighter level. That is a ton of extra damage that your Draconic companion is setting up because they are a threat in combat. The Drakewarden and the Cavalier are just a classic combination that make each other better. If you're going into higher levels with the Drakewarden, I highly suggest this multi-class. Now, I think the other main option is to go Cleric for their wide array of buff spells. Use these spells to make your Draconic companion and other members of your party better in combat. For instance, a first level spell like Bless becomes even easier to use because you still have an attack thanks to your Draconic companion that you can use in combat. It's not like you are completely losing a turn just to buff everyone else in the party. You still get to attack and deal damage, and I know that there are players out there who just don't like waiting 10, 20, 30 minutes for their turn in combat not to roll some damage dice. So this is a happy medium for you guys, especially if there's no one in your party who's willing to heal or buff others in combat. Now, in terms of what cleric subclass you want in combat, you could pick the obvious answer, which is the Peace Domain. Peace Domain clerics are strong, and you're going to instantly raise the power level of your character by an order of magnitude. However, if you want to go on a slightly different path, consider picking up the Nature Domain cleric subclass or the War Domain. But really, no matter what cleric subclass you choose, you're still going to be effective, and you're still going to be getting a robust suite of buffing spells to help you, your party, and your Draconic companion. However, now is the time where I have to talk about some of my biggest dislikes with this subclass, things that you should know before you decide to play Drakewarden. My biggest dislike of all is just how late you get to fly on the back of your dragon with this subclass. Technically, this subclass gives your dragon a flying speed at 7th level. However, if you are a medium-sized creature, which is most of the races, you cannot fly on the back of your dragon. Your dragon is basically a horse as you're riding it. And maybe, just maybe, I could understand this if it weren't for the fact that bards can fly on dragonback as soon as 10th level and paladins as soon as 14th level. Yes, the subclass that explicitly allows you to ride on the back of your dragon makes it so you do that later than other basic classes. I don't know what the fuck the designers were thinking with this decision. Now, some of you out there might be asking, wait, we can actually do this? Yes, because the Dragonel stat block can be used for the Find Greater Steed Paladin spell. This is a 4th level spell that Paladins could take, or Bards with their magical secrets can learn it at 10th level. Both of those options don't restrict a character to a certain size, and really, I think the easiest solution is to not recognize the size restriction for what creature is allowed to fly on the back of your Draconic companion. I make the argument that other races can fly at 1st level, and we have uncommon magic items that grant flight. There is just a deep part in me that is irked that if you play a smaller race, you get to fly on Dragonback a whole 8 levels sooner. It just seems like such a weird restriction that most times I'll just say, can I play a small orc or a small human instead? I legitimately have no reason why the designers did this, so I just always flat out ignore this rule. I think it is complete and utter nonsense, even just looking at the rest of the design of 5th edition. Additionally, the subclass feels like it is missing a telepathic connection between you and your dragon. This may be a nitpick, but so often in sessions, it just feels like it should be a thing. Especially because with Find Greater Steed, it is a thing. You do have a telepathic connection with your mount. It just feels like such a no-brainer to give you telepathy at some point with your draconic companion. And finally, I have to say this subclass is missing spells. The only additional spell you get with this subclass is Thaumaturgy, which is a cantrip. I find this so odd because the Drakewarden was released in a book with dragon-themed spells. They are right there. By only providing Thaumaturgy, it feels like the Drakewarden is missing out on its true potential of being the Dragon Rider subclass. It feels like in a lot of ways the designers became afraid of the Drakewarden and reeled back its features. So with that in mind, let's take a look at the ratings for this subclass. 5 categories: roleplay, combat, spells, utility, and the X Factor. The X Factor is what puts you apart from the other ranger subclasses and how well did you execute on that difference. To start off, the roleplay category is a 20 out of 20. Dragons are cool, and giving people a subclass where they have a dragon as a pet and they can ride it, even more cool. This fits into any prototypical D&D campaign and is an archetype we've seen across movies and other media for decades. Without a doubt, this is a 20 out of 20 in terms of roleplay, and combat is another high scoring category. The Drakewarden is scoring an 18 out of 20 here. Why? Well, the Drakewarden is having a massive impact on the action economy. You're bringing more attacks, more hit points, and you're not losing your hunter's mark in combat. Plus, you're picking up more speed if you're riding your dragon. You're picking up AoE when your dragon eventually starts breathing out its breath weapon. You're even getting resistances. Your dragon is another significant force in combat that enemies have to be aware of. The thing that holds this subclass back from being a 20 out of 20 is that your dragon doesn't deal a lot of damage. However, if it dealt more damage, I would say that this subclass is unbalanced. So really, I think the Drakewarden is right where it should be in combat. Strong, but not too strong, an 18 out of 20. Now though, we have to look at the spells that this subclass gets access to. Unfortunately, I can only give the Drakewarden a 5 out of 20. For this, I'm kind of counting the Draconic Companion as like a Find Familiar spell. You are using a spell slot sometimes to summon your companion, and you are using Thaumaturgy for instances here and there. However, this subclass is still incredibly deficient, especially when we compare it to other heavy-hitting ranger subclasses like the Fey Wanderer or the Gloomstalker, the Horizon Walker. I wish this could be higher, I really do. Up next though, we have the utility category, and I'm giving the Drakewarden a 13 out of 20. Your dragon is providing some utility. You can send the dragon to scout and they can report back on what they've seen. However, they are still a dragon, they might get caught. You can use your dragon in many situations, but it's never easy. A medium-sized dragon can be used to solve many situations, but none of them particularly well. Really, the Drakewarden at times can just feel clunky. There's no better way to say it outside of combat. This is where I would have loved to have an arsenal of spells provided to me by the subclass to help ease that tension and pressure, but we're not given that. In fact, as your dragon grows, it becomes harder and harder to use it in a utility sense. A small dragon can kinda creep through a dungeon. A large dragon the size of a car, not really. Then you add on top the flight problem that this subclass has, and I can't give it any higher than a 13 out of 20. Finally though, we come to the X Factor, and I really thought long and hard about this. This subclass gives your dragon companion everything you would expect from a dragon. It flies, it breathes fire, you can ride on it. However, this dream only comes true at high levels where even pre-written D&D adventures don't go. So really, for most players, that's a fake dream. This makes me kinda sad with how the subclass turned out. It had potential for absolute greatness and it just doesn't get there all the time. With that being said though, it still is a blast to play, especially if you make some concessions and conveniences. I could have put this X factor at 10, I could have put it at 20, so I'm gonna cut the difference and say that the Drakewarden has an X factor of 15. When this subclass is living up to its potential, it's incredible, but sometimes you will hit these walls and you don't understand why they're there. The Drakewarden is a subclass that is very back-end loaded, which is really weird. It doesn't follow normal conventions that I would expect from a modern 5th edition subclass. And I'll be honest, that hurts the final overall score of the Drakewarden. It comes out to a 71 out of 100. However, you can still have so much fun every single session playing a Drakewarden. It is a mind-boggling design conundrum of a subclass. I think with just a little bit of tweaking from the designers or a little bit of homebrew in your own games, that this can be one of the top 2 or top 3 ranger subclasses. The Drakewarden, when it's firing on all cylinders, hits some of the highest levels of fun I have ever seen in a 5th edition game. It's just about consistently hitting those points. Now, if you want a different type of dragon themed subclass, check out this video right here. Also, consider heading over to my Patreon where I offer one-on-one DM coaching. And thank you to all of my wonderful patrons. And finally, thank you for entering the dungeon. See ya.